Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. We're back with Season 2, Episode number 1, and it's exciting. I was just telling our guest today, Nadi, that I feel a little rusty after the break, but it'll be fun to get back into it. Today's episode is going to be great. But first, if this is your first time joining us and checking out the podcast is all about the Minnesota music scene here, but it definitely translates to pretty much every local music scene because there's not that many differences in them. But I pull from all the local artists, producers, engineers, and music industry folk that make up our scene to basically share information, share stories, share insights and knowledge so that everybody can kind of grow together. And my guest today is also very adept at doing the same thing. Nadi is the drummer in the esteemed local band Gully Boys, which we are going to get to today because that's definitely a topic we need to dive into. But the larger topic is that they're also the lead organizer at TCUP, which is a new organization here in the Twin Cities. It stands for Twin Cities United Performers. And we've had a lot of audience members ask about this organization and want to see it highlighted on the show. So we're going to get into that today and learn all about TCUP. I feel a little bit bad splitting up this episode or, dedicating most of it to TCUP over Gully Boys because I feel like that could be its own episode, but we're going to start there. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Nadi McGill.
Bad day, I guess I never really had a bad day. Bad day, I say, suddenly everything is looking okay. Okay, Tuesday, well it's got nothing on your typical case of the Mondays. Monday, does it ever stop feeling Monday?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really stoked to be here.
You've been recommended more than once, let's say that.
Love Minneapolis.
Yeah. It's cool to meet you in person. I've followed Gully Boys loosely, making a big splash in the scene. For anybody that's not familiar with Gully Boys, over 30,000 followers on most of your socials. I think won Best New Bands a few years back. Have played some big festivals, South by Southwest. Yeah, so you guys have been on a roller coaster of some really cool accomplishments. And you're working with our mutual friend, Zach Zern at Carpet Booth.
A homie.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit by just letting guests know more about you, your musical background, individually and with the Gully Boys.
Yeah. Individually, my musical background started when I was very young. I have always loved music, and it has always been my method of escapism, you could say. I am the oldest of 6, so I had a very busy household, and so I found solace in music. I played an orchestra growing up. I played the violin and then switched to the upright bass, and I've been a choir kid most of my life. So most of my background is in classical music, and I was a vocal performance major for a bit, and I loved singing. And in 2016, like January of 2016, I had met Kathy. We were working together at Ragstock, and we both had expressed a similar love of a very cringe emo band. And that led to us being admitting our secret desires of always wanting to be in a band, but not knowing how to do that or where to start. I played the violin, and I didn't know where that really fit in a punk band. And but my boyfriend at the time was a drummer. And so he had access to a drum kit, and she came over and we jammed and we played the one song that we knew how to play, which was Boyfriend by Best Coast. And we played that 20 times because she had never really played guitar before. And it was literally my first time sitting at a drum kit. And then she invited her longtime friend, Natalie, from middle school, who had just gotten a bass for Christmas. And she played Boyfriend by Best Coast with us because it's the only thing we knew how to do. And from that moment, we were like, let's be in a band. We decided that day after Natalie came and joined us that we were going to be in a band. And We said yes to our first show. 6 months later, we had no songs written. We had no idea what it like meant to play a show, but we, yeah, just kept saying yes. And I think for a long time, I felt like a phony and not willing to call myself a drummer because I was just like, I considered myself a musician, but I was never trained and I'd only been drumming for, I mean, I'm approaching a decade of drumming now. But yeah, I feel very confident in my ability to drum now, and I have been able to learn so much and grow so much in my musicianship through being in a band with my best friends. And when we added Mariah to Gully Boys, someone had told me a while ago, like, it's always good to play music with people who are like better than you because it like expands your ability to grow and pushes you to
True.
grow. And when Mariah joined, that definitely was the case because Mariah comes from a McNally background and went to Berklee School of Music and is a brilliant music theory mind and also is just a wonderful like musician. And so I think they really challenged our musicianship and pushed us and pushed me specifically. I'm really thankful for their, you know, you don't want to plateau. You want to keep growing. You want to keep getting better. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think all those little moments of music in my life. I was originally a fanboy first and foremost. I would sleep outside of venues. I would get to venues super early so I could be at the barricade. And that's like, I think where my love of being on stage and being in the room and being in a crowd full of like sweaty people
Yeah.
originated.
Yeah. Well, and I think for a lot of people, right?
Yeah,
that,
right?
That decide they want to be in a band. It's
Yeah,
that they're
you see it and
obsessed
you're
with
like,
it, yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that.
Okay. I've got a couple things that I just need to get into there.
Yeah.
For one, also vocal major. So we share that in common. Your classical background, are you still playing stringed instruments?
No, I don't. In college I stuck with orchestra. I mean, I'm sorry, I stuck with choir. I don't know why. I like had a little bit of like a rebrand where I felt really nerdy in growing up and being in orchestra my whole life. I really loved it. I do miss playing the upright bass every time I have the opportunity. I played the bass in like my church choir growing up, electric bass. So I don't really get to play my string instruments as much as I'd like to. It's every here and there, but choir, I like just started talking to a friend about wanting to join a community choir just because singing it in a group is just so much. Being in a band is awesome, but singing in a choir is like it like you go somewhere else. It's not about you, it's about like the group, and I miss that. And so I'm like seeking that out now.
I felt the same way recently. Of like when I reflect back on how much vocal singing I used to do, and I do very little now, and it's like, yeah, I kind of miss that.
It's wonderful. And
There's
there's
some
so many
really-
community choirs that I got to make the time because it's something that means
Yeah.
so much to me.
Yeah.
And they exist. We should just go sing in choirs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, you sit down at this drum kit day one. How did you manage to even put it together? I mean, I've sat at a drum kit before.
Yeah.
I would not get through a song on day one. Did it just feel natural?
Yeah, it did. It felt very like, I don't know. I had always wanted to play the drums. And so just a little bit of like backstory. At the school district that I grew up going to, you started orchestra in 4th grade and you could start band in 5th grade. And I just wanted to be a part of music, so I picked up the violin. But when band came around, I really, really wanted to be a percussionist. And my mom was like, absolutely not. That is way too loud in my house, which I will say, bold of her to say yes to violin because a 4th grader playing violin is also not super awesome and very loud.
Well, let's be fair. A 4th grader playing anything.
Exactly.
Not
But
super
I always,
awesome.
I had some like, internal rhythm. I feel like it would have been a little bit
Yeah.
better, but it doesn't matter. But I went behind my mom's back and I auditioned to be a percussionist, and they had 2 people, and I made it. I begged my mom, and my mom was still like steadfast and like not wanting that to be in her house, which a whole drum kit can be quite loud. So I had always like been drawn to rhythm. I had done like some percussion type hand drums through choir. I always volunteered. And I think playing the bass, which is a very rhythmic instrument most of my life, made it so when I sat behind the kit for the first time, I just like kind of felt it. The coordination was not there. And I also played the drums for the first couple times extremely quietly. I was like, it's a little intimidating to make that much noise. But yeah, I think I just honestly felt like home. It felt very cozy. I was like, oh, okay, I can figure this out. I still feel like, there's so much to learn and there's so much I don't know. But yeah, it felt very natural.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, if you're able to pull that off, that's kind of like usually, I mean, I guess, depending on how simplified you want to make a part.
Yeah.
When I think about that like first day of like, I'm going to pick up an instrument and try to play this, or like the first time you're with other people. Yeah, it was like super easy song
Yeah.
where you can do like a couple notes. I got this.
Exactly.
And it feels amazing.
Good
and
A-B.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
and then you're just hooked, and it's like,
Yeah.
I need to learn everything now. It's such an amazing moment.
Yes,
That
it
time
feels-
that comes together.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of, behind the podcast, behind TCUP, I know that there's a lot of work about like for people that are looking for that first moment of like, how does this come together? Or maybe they just had that and now they want the next steps. And a lot of it is just, you just got to try.
Yeah.
You just got to get going and see what happens and hope that you're with the right people in the right place, because all of that's part of it too. But
Yes.
So the Gully Boys starts to do shows and gigs. What were some sort of big inflection points for the band where it felt like, oh, wow, this is working?
Yeah. So we started in 2016, and our goal was we had one goal as a band, and it was to get a song on either Radio K or The Current. And we were like, if we can do this, we've made it. This is the coolest thing. And so I don't think we like had any like ideas or desires beyond that. We started playing because we loved hanging out. First of all, it was a good excuse to just like kiki around, but also it was a great way for us to like work through a lot of the things that Kathy was pretty shy growing up. I was pretty shy growing up. And so was Natalie. Honestly, we were all pretty introverted, and it was a good opportunity for us to like be loud and to like take up space. And it felt really uncomfortable at first, especially when people are looking at you. But then soon like finding our voice through that. And so I think that's why we started, and that's why we stuck with it. 2018, we won City Page's Best New Band, and we played First Ave's Best New Band. And I remember waking up that day and seeing that and feeling like, honestly, like a sense of like overwhelm and excitement, but also a little moment of like dread, like, have we fooled everyone? Like, we don't know what we're doing. And like, oh no, like, we never meant to be here. But it was rooted in excitement, but also just like a lot of imposter syndrome. And had a moment we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. What do we do now? This is like beyond the ceiling that we gave for ourselves. How do we like meet this moment? And I think it was talking to a lot of peers that it was like, you just first of all need to relax. Like, you got in this position because of doing exactly what you're doing. You don't need to change and be something else now. And that felt really like reassuring, because yeah, when suddenly you have a lot of eyes on you and people are like, you feel like you have to be something else and you have to be perfect and you can't make mistakes and all of these things. But we were just doing it because we wanted to rock and roll. And some of our shows were like really bad, and we biffed it, but it was, we love each other and we love playing. So I think 2018 was a big moment for us because we released like a collection of demos that we had recorded. We won Best New Bands. We got to play First Ave stage for the first time. And we had also gone on a tour that year for the first time, which was very DIY. It was mostly just an opportunity for us to go on vacation. We like played shows, but like we also had like a lot of days off to be like, we've never been to New Orleans before. Let's like go get beignets and walk around.
It's a great way to do a first tour.
It was perfect. And yeah, we had a lot of like amazing memories. But yeah, 2018 was a really big year for us, where it was a moment where we're like, oh, maybe we could take ourselves seriously. Maybe there is something here. We still like, we're very like novice at our to our instruments, and had a lot of learning and a lot of like, okay, what does being in a band mean? And is this something we actually want to commit to? And are we wanting to take just the next step? And so I think for the next 2 years, we like really focused on that. And we were like, okay, well, we're going to like give this a go. We like writing songs together. We really get along together. My bandmates are genuinely my best friends, and I feel very fortunate to say that. I know that's not the case. When I learned that that was not the case for everyone, I was like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
This is one of the most vulnerable, intimidating things.
Yeah.
I just have to trust them. So then 2020 happened. We all know what happened in 2020. In that moment, we were able to turn to TikTok and social media, and we were able to find our people outside of Minneapolis, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
And we were able to grow our audience and our listenership and our community. And so when we came out of that, we were even stronger of a band. And through that time, we also met Zach Zern. We started working with him. And so I think 2018 and 2020 were both really pivotal moments where we were like, oh, we see ourselves as a band now and see ourselves as like a part of the Minneapolis music community. And then 2020 was like, okay, are we going to take ourselves seriously? Because that would have been a good opportunity to just be like, we're going to do something else in life now and maybe turn a different way. But we came out stronger for it, for sticking together. And now we are getting ready to release our debut album, and it feels exciting and scary. But yeah, I say it took 4 years for us to figure out what we were doing and 4 years for us to do the thing.
Yeah.
So that's
And
where
I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
You know, because
Mhm.
any faster than that's kind of crazy too.
it's gas all the time then.
Yeah.
Which is,
And
it already feels that way.
every now and then there's somebody that comes in that's like, whoa, you've had so many huge things happen in like 2 years
Yeah.
of doing this. Like, how are you handling
Yeah.
this?
So,
Because
I mean,
the
you
ups
see
and downs.
Chappell Roan,
Yeah.
and that was overwhelming for her. And I feel a lot of empathy for her because I can't imagine. I mean, you working for something for 10 years and having it explode at that rate is like gas all the time.
Yeah. You know, being in a band is like this weird, especially in the early days, but I think for some people always, is this spectrum of trying to balance imposter syndrome, as you alluded to, and envy.
Yeah.
And it's like these extremes of like, oh, I wish I could do that and I want this and I wish I had that opportunity to, I don't belong.
Yeah.
How did we have this? And they're opposites, but you feel both of them
Yeah.
pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing and it can really make you kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I think that part of finding stability in that is what you were saying. You find your people. You start to understand who you are, what your thing is. You start to identify of like, okay, this is us.
Yes.
And then you can kind of relax. It doesn't, the other things don't go away.
Yeah.
They still happen,
A little quieter though.
but a little quieter. Yeah. Maybe a little less intense.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just keep stumbling forward.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a never ending journey. You
Yeah.
keep getting better, you keep trying to strive for better things, but everybody does, no matter where you are on that journey. You know, speaking of your bandmates being your best friends and the vulnerability of being in a band, talk about your guys' creative process.
It's very collaborative, which I feel so fortunate to be a part of. My bandmates, we come in with different ideas, they're little nuggets of something, and we flesh it out together often. There are a few times where Natalie, our bassist, she is a phenomenal songwriter. She'll come in with a little piece and be like, I kind of wrote this song. I don't know how I feel about it. And it's a banger. And I'm like, girl, that's crazy that you were just like, I don't know. I think that happened once when we were recording it with Zach. We were working on an EP. We were working on our Favorite Son EP. And we were stuck on one of the songs that we were working on and we didn't know. We're like, okay, maybe we just need to like table this for now. And she was like, I have this song that I've been working on that I don't really know if it fits. And it was one of our favorite songs. It's one of our favorite songs to play now. It's called The Way. It's a good cathartic, anthemic song to scream together. So it's very collaborative, especially on this last album. We did a different method, which we hadn't done before. We were feeling a bit stuck. We wrote so many songs, and you have to write bad songs to write the good songs.
Absolutely.
And we were in the studio and feeling like we wrote these songs and we don't know if we like love them that much. We don't know if these are our best. Is it our best songwriting? And so we did a few days, which I know is very privileged, in the studio with Zach, and we broke off into 2 teams of 2, and we gave ourselves like 6 hours, and we wrote a song or the pieces of a song, and then we would come back and do show and tell, and then we would switch the 2, and then those 2 would write a song, and we did that 3 times, and we ended up with 6 new songs, and 2 of those are going on the album, which something came out of it, and it was just like a really good opportunity for us to. We usually write like collaboratively or like in a big group or in like the singular, but to break off into 2 smaller groups and then shift it around. And for this album, we were like, what do we want this album to sound like? What are we trying to say? So we broke our album into like different quadrants on a graph, and we were like, so we got BPM on one axis and like light to heavy on the other axis. And so figuring out where songs went in that quadrant and if there was any glaring moments. And so trying to write a song to fill that quadrant was like a good task for us to go in with. You are writing a song that is bouncy and mid-tempo and a little bit on the pop side, and then that's your task for the day. And so that was really fun for us to do. It's very different than what we have done. And it allowed us to be more intentional about what we were trying to write, and a lot of it, like a lot of the album is writing what we were feeling and writing what we were going through, but then also like writing with a quadrant in mind it challenged us to write things we probably wouldn't have written before.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I find can be more inspiring is the more limitations you have on something. Did you find that having more sort of boundaries made things more easy?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's very easy to get lost in the endless options of what it can be.
Yeah.
And so to give yourself like, yeah, a little bit of like a container for the ideas to be held in. So you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to write this and I'm not going to write this, but I am going to write something that's like punky and upbeat and kind of like Rage Against the Machine-y. That made it so much easier to be like, okay, yes, I am going to do that.
Yeah.
Versus the many different types of songs you can write, which we have written a lot of those, and we're like, this doesn't really make sense. Why did we do this? But you had to.
Yeah, I agree. There's an element of trying to get, like, when you first write your initial stuff, it all feels a bit sacred.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's such a magical process. So once you've done it, and you're like, wow, this is amazing, and this is so good. But then you do it enough, and you go, okay, maybe that wasn't the best thing that I've wrote.
Yes.
But you have to do that. You
Yes.
have to write a lot of stuff to be able to be more objective about it.
Yes. You can't be precious about every song. I mean, I do feel precious about what the process and the joy of writing these songs together, and also just recognizing that these songs are just meant to stay in the vault, and it was fun to write them, and I worked through something when writing it, and that's enough. That served its purpose. I think also looking back at some of our older work, we wrote songs and we were like, these are just the songs that we have, so we have to record them. And we were very precious about it because it was like our first songs that we had ever written together as a band, which makes sense that we were like, this is it. And so now it feels liberating to be like, no, I don't need to do that one. And a song that maybe was on the A track of the album, writing a better song and being able to be like, well, this one's getting bumped out because it was on the lower end, and having flexibility and not feeling so precious about every single song.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing for everybody to at least hear, if you haven't come to that conclusion on yourself. But to some extent, there's no skipping past the beginning.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to
start
you
somewhere.
have to start somewhere, and and some of that is going to be just recording what you've got and learning at some point that it was okay.
Yeah. I feel very cringe listening to some of our older songs, and I think that feels good because it feels good to listen back on those and see how far we've come, because we all had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. One of our oldest songs is one of our biggest songs. And I'm always just like, really? That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it speaks to some people, and I have to just accept that.
I have a real hard time going back and
Yeah.
listening to stuff that I've worked on. I'm like, oh, you can do better.
I know.
I never have that feeling go away.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll feel proud for different reasons of like, I think we did a really good job on this project, or like that was that artist's best work of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things that I feel good about. But yeah, for the most part, I'm just uninterested.
Yeah.
Like, let's work on the next thing.
Yep. Moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Important.
absolutely.
But that's good though. You're not plateauing. You're able to look back and be like, oh, I've learned, and I would have done that differently now, which feels really awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yes, at the same time, I would like at some point to feel like, hey,
Yeah.
I did a thing that I'm proud of for a
That's true.
while.
I think that goes back to the imposter syndrome and the envy thing though, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's always the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get a little bit into the teacup side of things. Have you always been sort of an activist organizer? Has that been a part of your DNA?
Yeah, a little bit of yes and no. I started organizing when I was 18. So I guess yes. I guess for the last 12 years of my life, I have been in organizing spaces in some capacity. Started organizing when I was 18 with a group of other students, college students who were working to get police officers out of Minneapolis public schools, the student resource officers, and realizing that, especially in 2014, that they were causing more harm than good. And that was around the time that Jamar Clark was murdered, and the conversation around police, just should they be in classrooms, and are they actually providing students with resources and help? And so that's where I started organizing, and through that I started organizing around education as well, in terms of we got a bill passed, and when I was 19, that changed the way that remedial courses were offered in college, so that students who needed to take remedial courses didn't have to pay for it out of pocket, that was something that the state could step in and aid those students so that they could continue college, and it wouldn't be a barrier for them to cross the finish line.
Yeah.
And through that, I think that was a moment where I had felt so powerful, and as a person who had a voice that I could actually use. And I had never spoken at the Capitol before, and I've never had never spoken to legislators, and it was an opportunity where I was like, oh, like my voice does matter, and I can use it for good, or I can be quiet. And it didn't feel right to continue to be quiet once I found my voice. And so I'd stayed with that organization for like 7 years, and I took a small break from organizing when I went back to college, and Gully Boys was taking off. But it always been like a part of Gully Boys. It just like moved into more of advocacy work, I guess, where we would donate profits from merch and to orgs that we felt really connected to, especially as queer musicians living in pretty tumultuous times now. It's kind of always been that way for most of our band's life. So yeah, so getting involved in different ways. And then in 2020, when we saw the murder of George Floyd, and I live in South Minneapolis, and I saw my city catch a flame and so much need, I was like, I know how to organize. I'd been out of it for a few years, but I can use these skills. And I'm not in a band right now, but I do have access to a van. And so I actually started working with Nadi. We started organizing aid for protesters. I was using my Gully Boys tour van to shuttle protesters out to safety, for picking people up, to giving them ride homes. And through that, I was like, oh, I actually like can't just not work in an organizing space. Like, I love people, and I love being around people, and I think like music was a really good way for me to remind myself that like community is actually one of the most important things to me. And when you're in your early 20s, you feel very much like you're alone in this world. And it was through those people that I was able to like find my way back to organizing and not feel so alone. And so I stayed in organizing from 2020 on. I worked at Women for Political Change as an event coordinator and organizing people. And for a lot of my organizing is trying to center joy in pretty tough times. So yeah, so that's how TCUP started. I had just left a job. I was working for Catalyst Music, which is another nonprofit, and I was really enjoying working with young people, and I was working as a talent buyer, but I felt not the best working on the other side. I am very much on the artist-friendly side, and so I left that job, and I got a call to create a solidarity campaign around First Ave's move to unionize. And it was, at first, they called me to ask if I knew anyone who would be interested in doing it, and I had recommended a few people. And then I got another call, and I was asked, would you be interested in doing this? And so that's how TCUP started. We were a group of musicians who were creating a solidarity campaign in support of the workers, because we need venues, and venues need us, and venues cannot operate, and we cannot operate without the venue workers, who like are the ones who we actually are having FaceTime with. And I had a lot of like personal interest in the matter. My sibling has worked at First Ave for 8 years, and I want a better workplace for them. A lot of my friends have worked there, and so I was like, I felt a lot of risk in doing this, because it's not a us against First Ave, but it was like a us with First Ave. And through that work, though, TCUP wasn't really a thing. It was just like a group of musicians, and we kept talking. We realized that a lot of the problems and frustrations that the workers of First Ave had, that were also like, oh, that we've had similar experiences
Sure.
as musicians, and those are the conversations you usually have in the green room or in the alleyway and loading out. And it felt like a really good opportunity for us to have it from moving it from private to public and be talking about these things. And we were like, oh, okay, well, I feel like as musicians, we're often like organizing and advocating for everyone else. Why don't we do it for ourselves? And that's how TCUP started. We had an excellent campaign. We had like 300 signatures from musicians, both locally and nationally, saying that they want to stand beside the workers. And we were meeting weekly, and there were so many musicians from so many different parts of the scene that we were like, well, let's continue to like talk, and let's continue these conversations, and this shouldn't just end here. And that's how TCUP started. And in February of last year, we started organizing on our behalf, and it started with just like doing a lot of research, having a lot of conversations, issuing a lot of surveys, getting a lot of feedback, like listening to the scene. Yeah, and we just haven't stopped, and we just continue to grow, and it's been absolutely beautiful. And it feels wonderful to marry my love of organizing and being in community with people with my love of music. And
Yeah, absolutely.
for so long, they had felt so separate. And this just has felt like the most natural thing that I could ask for.
It
So
sounds
very
like that.
fortunate.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my latest offering for independent artists here at Helvig Productions. As you may know, I'm a music producer located here in the Twin Cities, and I've been running a recording studio for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of local artists spanning pop, rock, Americana, and all the various forms of indie singer-songwriter music. And I know just how hard it can be to finish your own songs. It's easy to get stuck in a death loop of endlessly tweaking things, rewriting sections, or just completely starting over and never feeling satisfied. This is why I've started offering a free song analysis, which I call Musician's Roadblock Relief. If you're currently stuck working on that same song over and over again, I'd love to offer you some ideas that may help. I will objectively analyze your track and offer some helpful possibilities to hopefully get you unstuck and back to finishing that project. My feedback will cover one of the 3 areas where I've seen artists struggle the most. The first one is the song itself. I've had artists come to me wanting to produce a song that just isn't great. But there's no sense in spending money on a bad song because no amount of production or mixing will fix that. You need strong melodies, good lyrics, and a nice flow from start to finish. The second roadblock I see artists run into is bad production. Even if the song is good, the production needs to match the sound you want. Are the sounds right for your style? Is the arrangement too messy? How does it build? Are you doing too much or too little? When all the supporting production elements work in harmony, the song comes to life. And the last thing is mixing problems. Nothing is more frustrating than loving your song but discovering it sounds terrible everywhere outside of your home studio. Pro-level mixing is hard and it takes years to master. Mixing problems may be holding you back. If you've wasted enough time in the trial and error loop and are ready to try a different approach, head to helvigproductions.com/fixmysong and fill out my application. That's HELVIG productions.com/fixmysong. I'll take a look at your specific situation, and if I think I can help, I certainly will. It's 100% free and may just be the thing to get you unstuck and back making progress toward your goals. So for people that don't know a thing about
Yeah.
TCUP, walk people through what the organization is, what it stands for, what its goals are.
Yeah. So TCUP, Twin Cities United Performers, our mission statement, our main goal, and what we're working towards is we want to make Minnesota, and we believe we can make Minnesota the best place in the world to be a performer. We have so much talent here. And every time I have friends who are on tour who come through and they are able to like go to a show or play with Minnesota musicians, they are blown away by the amount of talent that is like insular to the city. And so our goal is to just shine a light on the things that aren't super awesome and be like, just because the industry works this way at a national level doesn't mean that we have to follow suit, and that we actually have agency to create a scene that bolsters performers and supports our independent music venues. And we have to be able to work together. And so having the conversations is the first step of like just naming things that haven't been super awesome, and how do we address these feelings of exploitation and move it towards a conversation of collaboration. We are very fortunate. We live in Minnesota where we have so much money that is funding arts. How do we actually access that, and how do we disperse that to musicians, like making sure DIY musicians are included in the conversation and feel like they have access to that funding? We have now an Arts and Cultural Affairs Department in Minnesota, which is super awesome. So we can actually have someone who's advocating for the arts at a city level for Minneapolis. And so, yeah, our goal is to have these conversations and to fight for a community and a city and a state where our creative labor is actually seen as labor. And it's not just a hobby, because a lot of us can't imagine doing anything else. And you should be able to work one job and that be enough. And I know how many hours go into writing a song, learning an instrument, to produce a song, to engineer a song. All of the things that go into performance is so much labor that is often unrecognized and has been undervalued through time. But somebody's making a lot of money because the entertainment industry continues to grow, and we just would like to see some of that invested back into the arts so that we can continue to make the things that we do. And I genuinely believe that we can make Minnesota the best place. I think we're well on our way in the conversation, and we want to hear from everyone, from all performers. So this conversation isn't just one-sided.
Sure. Yeah. what have been the topics that have been brought up the most so far
Yeah.
of the conversations you've had up to this point?
So we actually just launched a campaign, and it was around a lot of the conversations that we had had. Our first campaign is around just transparency and legitimacy as a musician. And it's twofold. It's creating a set of standards. We know that all gigs are not created equally. And some venues have an excellent communication going into a show. You get a great advance. You have all the information that you need, what time you're supposed to be there, where you should park. And some venues, you cross your fingers and hope that you figure out what time you're playing and what time you should be there. And we want to just kind of like raise the bar and have a level of just like a unified standard of communication and transparency.
Sure.
And I think that feels like a really wild place to start because it feels like that should kind of be expected, but it's just the reality of the world is that it's not. And so our first campaign is empowering artists to advance all of their shows. We created a template with the help of like 30 or so musicians to like, what information do you need to have a successful show? And so we created an advanced template that we are gathering pledge cards right now from musicians saying that like, you know what, I actually am going to ask for what I need, to demand what I need. And I'm going to like kind of raise my standards for myself. And like, I do deserve this information and I'm going to go and seek it. And everyone has a better show when all the information has been communicated, both the venue and the artists. And so that is our first campaign. We are over halfway to our goal of collecting pledge cards. We have been having HQ days for people to come in and learn about TCUP, to see the pledge, to see the advance, to also know that like the advance is just like a starting point. You can alter it for your needs. I can't assume the needs of you as an artist, but I can give you the tools I can offer you tools and resources that may make your experience more streamlined and better. We've also had conversations around programs that we could, this is like still in like the very like early stages, but like what would a universal base pay look like for musicians playing in Minnesota, and how can we like create programs around that to, you know, alleviate some of the burden. If the conversation, so I'm not sure, hang on, let me rewind a little bit.
Sure.
Some of the conversation that was very clear through our survey and the Minneapolis Music Census just ran a survey as well, is that venues are frustrated by like how expensive talent is, and talent is feeling like they're like frustrated by how low gig pay is.
Sure.
And so for both fighting for scraps, something is wrong. So I feel like there's a fundamental issue. And I feel very strongly that like that is when like the city can step in. And we in Minneapolis have a live entertainment tax that extracts money from our labor, and it's really hard for venues to compete with that. And I would love to see that reinvested into our community
Sure.
and to alleviate some of the burden for venues and having to like keep up with the rising costs of talent, especially in comparison, like fighting with like Live Nation for our independent venues so they can continue to like invest in local music musicians can continue to feel invested in, and maybe make Minneapolis a more attractable city to come and tour through. And I think we've already started to see that. I feel really excited about the possibilities and the conversations that we've been having. How can we have better safety at shows? How can we make shows more accessible? These are all just like things that have come up, and I think it's not shocking to any artist, but like having a space to like to talk about it and like to be heard and be like, yeah, this isn't an isolated incident. This is kind of a problem that has been felt by many that we can talk about, and like let's bring the conversation to venues. Let's bring the conversation to the industry at large, and how do we actually do something about this, so we can all feel supported, and that we can all feel that we all can continue to do what we want to do and make this a more sustainable career path for us. And right now it feels very like at odds with one another, and I don't think that we have to feel that way. I don't think we have to operate from a scarcity mindset, that there is abundance and that we all can can succeed.
Sure. I mean, there's so much that could be a part of the conversation, right? So I'm sure some of the challenge is like, what do we want to focus on?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things to get into, and a lot of factors and complex entanglements of things. But at the very least, just having a place where musicians can gather and share experiences, problems, and to brainstorm amongst themselves of there is a better way to do this. There actually, you can ask for that information, and it's okay to, or if there's a problem with a place, that everybody's had, to be able to report it, which kind of leads to my next question is there buy-in from venues? Are they interested in being a part of the conversation? And if not, is there leadership at TCUP that reaches out like, hey, we've been hearing this, we just want to let you know?
Yeah, definitely. So we had our campaign launch at the Green Room. We've worked with the Green Room quite a bit. Tanner
That's great.
he is a musician himself, and so he understands how hard it is to be a musician and what it means to be a performer. And also he is a venue owner and he is a business owner and the complexities and the hardships that come along with that. And so I think like because we've been able to have pretty candid conversations with Tanner, it's just been a good opportunity for us to like grow and not just talking to performers, but also like we want venues to be a part of the conversation. We've had success and support from Pillar, the coffee shop in the venue. We've had conversation with Cloudland, and we want to be in more conversation with venues. I feel like right now our capacity as a pretty new org has been primarily focused on like making sure musicians know and performers know that they have a place to go. But we know that venues are we have a symbiotic relationship and we are all part of the same ecosystem. And we want to invite them into the conversation, and they are. I think right now our focus has been on musicians, but for this campaign that we're launching and that we're running right now, there is a moment where like after we've collected our 500 pledge cards, we want to go to venues and be like, hey, we're willing to raise our standards and advance all of our shows. Can we ask the same of you, and can we count on you to meet us in this moment? And like, can we like say that like we are all going to take ourselves with a level of professionalism and seriousness and transparency in our communication so everybody succeeds.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely, I have been a talent buyer. I know how hard it is to operate a music venue. We don't want to like cancel venues. And I think there's like a misconception that we're like against venues. We are very much for venues. We are for a healthy scene.
Yeah.
If there are things that like that haven't been super awesome at venues, we want to be able to have a conversation to work through that and see change behavior. Same with like, how any place would be. If something is not working and something is consistently being told like, hey, this isn't awesome, we should do something about it, we'd hope that would be.
And if you've been in the scene, in any scene, I'm sure in any city long enough, you've seen some not awesome things. Yeah. For sure. Simple things like poor communication or poor planning, or not like you said it was going to be this and it's not this, to not getting paid or not getting paid what was agreed upon. I've experienced all of that myself. So that all makes sense. I guess I'm also kind of curious though, like, are you going to talk to the venue?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've started talking with venues. I think right now, because we are focused on musicians, it hasn't been the top of our priority, but it is part of our strategy is to be working together. And I feel very comfortable talking to venues. A lot of the people who work in the venues are my friends. And I want to be able to be like, hey, we're doing this thing and we want you to be a part of it and we want to move together collectively.
I guess I mean specifically when there's a problem.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing is that has already arisen in TCUP. We had a musician, a part of TCUP, who had in writing that she was going to get in a guarantee, and the owner said, I actually don't think you deserve this, and didn't pay. And so we messaged with this venue back and forth. We had lots of conversation, and we were like, well, this is actually not fair, and this person still provided labor and provided entertainment at your venue and deserves compensation. And so we were able to get her half of what was guaranteed through conversation and dialogue, and not just like being like, hey, this is not okay. You can't treat people like this. And like, you're not seeing, I feel like there's a level of like, you don't see us as professionals and as business folks trying to do our best as well.
Yeah.
So when things have been, that has come up once, and I know it won't be the last time. We have to talk about the things if we want to see a better scene. If we continue to let things slide under the rug, if we continue to let poor behaviors happen, then we can't expect anything to change, and we have to be brave and use our voices. And It's also much easier when you have a collective voice, when you have a voice of
True.
many musicians. It's not just one person. It's
Feels
a
less
group.
like there could be retaliation or something
Exactly.
on
And
blowback
also,
on.
like, but that's just like inherent risk in like organizing in general.
Yeah.
And like that's I totally understand why people maybe have hesitations and fears, but the idea is that like, yeah, we are much stronger when we stand together, and we got your back, and we don't want these behaviors to happen anymore. We don't want them to happen behind closed doors either. We want to be able to be like, hey, this is not cool, and we want to see you do better because we believe you can do better as a venue or as any space that hosts performers, and we should all be held to that standard.
Agreed. I think at the very least, the conversation and knowing that things aren't going to continue to operate in the shadows.
Yeah.
That everything can be brought to light, and that, ideally then you're held to some level of responsibility, and that's good for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how often is TCUP meeting?
Yeah. We meet as a team. So there's a team. We have a campaign team of about 30 people. We have our build team, which is our communications and social media. We have a newsletter coming out soon. It's our event planning, and it's our general outreach of about 25. And we meet every other Thursday. We meet once a week, basically, from 5 to 7. We also have an online platform called The Cupboard, which is a team of about 10. That is an online forum, if you are familiar. Think like Reddit or like early MySpace days. It was actually the person who designed it. His name is Alex of Yellow Ostrich, based it off of the Dave Matthews Band forum that he was inspired by. So it has like places to find band members to play with, bands to play with if you're trying to fill a bill. A whole bunch of shows just get automatically added so you can see at any given night, like, oh, it's Tuesday, I want to go see a show, what's happening around town.
Yeah.
A way for us to like stay connected that doesn't rely on algorithm, where we can actually talk to one another.
Yeah.
And so that team meets once a month. We highlight different TCUP members on there. It's a really fun place for us to be connected in the internet that isn't, Instagram, where you see a cool flyer for a show, but it was 2 days ago by the time it reaches your feed, and you're
Right.
like, dang, I would have liked to go to that. So we meet once a week. We have open meetings once a month where anyone can just drop in. But also, if at any point you're interested in joining TCUP, we have a link on our cupboard to have a one-to-one, because we believe in actually knowing the people that we're organizing with. So we have FaceTime and one-to-ones with everyone that are as a part of TCUP. So, I know why you're here and like what your background is. And so we're actually people like organizing together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a whole bunch of HQ days right now as we're doing this campaign, which are all available on the cupboard as well, that anyone can just drop in, learn more about the pledge, learn more about TCUP, see our advance, ask any questions. And those are, scattered throughout the first 2 weeks of February.
Cool. Well, we'll provide links and stuff at the end of this episode for all of that, and that'll be in our show notes as well. Is the goal ultimately to unionize? It was born out of the unionizing movement at First Avenue. Is that kind of the dream or not?
A little bit of yes and no. I think our goal right now is to like create a space for performers to feel powerful and to build power and to like create some change in our industry. And so if that looks like a union down the road, then it'll be a union down the road. I think because we're so new that we want to be able to remain flexible to what our people need. And it definitely has been talked about, and it definitely could happen. But it's like there's a whole process for that to get set up. There's also already a musicians union here. So like figuring out like how could we work alongside them? Like what does that look like? So yes, it can be. But right now we're talking with our people. Like what do we need? What would actually best serve us?
Sure.
Yeah, one way or another. It could.
Yeah, not committing to something, but
But not closing the door.
yeah, first just figuring out what the organization wants to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, since it's going to be more and more people here,
Yes.
ideally. Yeah.
Yeah.
What other goals are in the immediate future for TCUP?
Right now, we have our campaign that we are in the middle of.
This is specifically for the advance
This
pledge.
is our advance. Yeah, it's just increased standards
Mhm.
for communication in the Twin Cities, and also to like build base and to like actually get to know the Minneapolis performers. So much of our scene is kind of segregated by genre,
Definitely.
and we want to shake that up. They like live in these silos where people don't really get to have much cross And we want to see more of that. We want to see people like engaging. And I love when I go to a show and it's a mixed genre bill. And like, I get to meet people that I haven't had the opportunity to meet
Yeah.
and to hear sounds and bands that maybe wouldn't have come across my radar because of, being in the indie rock and the DIY scene. You kind of hard to break out of that. This year, like we want to like invite people in so we can figure out where are we going? Where do we want to go? What do people need? And then we're also, like I had mentioned, working on doing a lot of research visits, having a lot of conversations to figure out like how can we create a scene where our labor is valued and what does that look like? And capitalism is a real thing, and it feels sometimes icky to like tie your art to like money, but like you have to be able to buy groceries
Yeah.
and you have to be able to like have the heat on and all of these things. So like how do we make it so that musicians and performers can live? We are creative thinkers, so we can think outside of the box and what that looks like. And so that feels exciting. And we want to meet people, we want to invite them in, and we want to have these conversations about what would that look like for you? What would you need as a musician? And we can't make something obviously for like everyone, but we can hear feedback and use that as a starting point.
Well, yeah, even if the result isn't, and now I can live off my music.
Yes.
Because that's not going to be the case for a lot of people.
Yes.
But at least it can be, but now I'm doing this as best as it can be done, or being treated fairly, or at least I know what to expect, maybe of all things, that my expectations are set in a correct manner. Because ultimately, I alluded to this earlier of just like how complicated a lot of these problems will be.
Yeah.
They don't just get solved overnight. There's larger
it's not like
issues.
a blanket. You can't do a one size fit all.
Exactly.
And that makes sense. But we can have conversations that like, okay, what are the glaring commonalities and how can we address those?
Definitely.
And that's what we are focusing on. Like the biggest one was transparency. So we're like, that's a perfect place to start. Let's just raise the communication.
Yeah.
But yeah, continuing that conversation of like finding common. We have a venue report card and we're collecting data for it. That's like, which venues are doing awesome, which venues are maybe doing less than awesome.
Sure.
Which is a conversation starter as well.
I think that's needed. I think just more transparency around what is happening.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing either. It's just, and it's also like, these are people's experiences. Like they lived through them. We can't be like, well, you're wrong for that. But
granted, it goes both ways.
It definitely.
There's venues that can tell horror stories about the people that have come through them, and
absolutely.
Like that was.
There's usually consequence for those artists though who usually come.
It's true because they can just choose not to ever book them or withhold pay and so on.
Yeah.
And there's not so much of anything a musician can do if they're That's true. It definitely balances things out a little bit more. Oh, I wanted to get to, since we were on the union topic, an audience submitted question. Dan Lowen, and Dan, if I'm saying your last name wrong, I apologize, asked a very good question of why not sort of join forces with the local musicians union here in town. He asked specifically, why not collaborate with and or improve our existing local 30-73 musicians union?
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about.
Yeah, we met with the musicians union. I think we would love to, first and foremost. However, like in our conversation, we did realize that we kind of serve different artists. The musicians union kind of focuses pretty exclusively on contracted musicians. So like you think of your pit orchestras, your Minnesota orchestra, your theater orchestras, and then also independent artists who get like contracted to like play piano on like Taylor Swift song or stuff like that. And the most of the folks that we engage with are like playing like 331 or playing at venues around town. So that we just serve different folks. Also, as the local union pretty much exclusively serves musicians, whereas we want to like open up to performers, which in like burlesque performers, drag performers, comedians. Okay. And right now we're like pretty musician heavy, but that's what the performer stands for, is we want to
I was not aware of
conversation.
That. Okay.
Yeah. And so like, we have our first burlesque member of TCUP because they engage with performance in the same way. And so I think because of our bases are being a little bit different, but we would love to work with them and work alongside them. We have met with them before. We had conversation. We shared a lot of ideas, but nothing really came of that. But that's not to say that something can't come of that in the future.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So from all the conversations you've had, it sounds like sort of one of the first resources or this tool that TCUP is going to provide is this advanced template, as you called it. Why don't you describe that to people? What is an advance? What is this
Yeah.
template going to help you do?
That's one of the things that I learned the hard way. I didn't know what an advance was. And an advance, it is usually a document or often it comes in the form of an email of your show. You get a hold on a show, you get your show confirmed, and then you get your show advanced. And your show, the advancement is the information that you need to have a successful show. So that includes what the ticket split's going to be, what the ticket price is going to be. So it's sometimes good to just have like the venue's address on there and where the best place to park is. Are there any parking spots available to the artist? And so all these general information, ours includes the artist stating what their needs are and like, this is how big my touring party is or my band. I'm the day of show contact. Here's my information. This is what we need. And then we ask of the venue, what's the day of show schedule? What time should I be there for load in? What time is sound check? Around how long do I have to play and what time is my set? Is there a green room available? Is there Wi-Fi available? Is the Wi-Fi in the green room different from the Wi-Fi in the venue? Is there private bathrooms or should I use the public bathroom? And a lot of these questions we formulated from musicians who have just started playing to like people who have been touring, and these are like started accumulating things that are helpful to know prior to going to a show. Is there a merch cut? Where is the merch area when we load in? Is the venue accessible? Like, are there steps to get into the venue? Do I have to load, all of my gear up 3 flights of stairs?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just like it's very basic information that I don't think a lot of people realize that they can actually ask for. I didn't realize that was something that I could do, that I could advance my own show, honestly, until we had went on tour with Bad Bad Hats in 2022. And they had sent an advance out as advancing their tour. And I was like, oh, I had never seen this done. I'd always just kind of waited around until the venue sent the advance. And oftentimes there are venues who are really excellent about that. But then there's also a handful of venues that I'm like texting like, hey, just wondering what time I should be there tonight and how long of a set, and that like that flutter and that frustration that you feel not awesome.
Kind of need to know this.
Kind of need to know this. This is like, in my show. So yeah, so how do we like level that out? And so we really want to like let artists know that like you can ask for these things, and also you can be diligent in letting the venue know what you got going on in your party. Like, send over your W-9, attach your stage plot and your input list.
Sure.
And making this communication as streamlined, as seamless as possible often leads to everyone knowing what's going on the day of the show, and it makes it so much easier.
Less stress.
Less stress.
It's more professional. And in some cases, you've got some things in writing
Yes.
that you might need,
And that's
particularly with the splits.
Exactly. And people I don't know if everyone realizes that is like contractual, and like you can refer back to that and be like, no, we agreed upon this.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a tool for you to be able to advocate for yourself if you end up in a sticky situation.
And again, I can't imagine that there's any downside to this. Like, everybody benefits. The venue benefits from getting all that information and because then they can say, okay, good, they checked in, they're on top of their stuff. I can count on them to be on time if they're doing this. It's just great for everybody.
Yeah.
It raises the bar, as you've said several times, for the scene, and that'll be good. There's a lot of tiers to things. We've already got venues in town that are doing this and do it well, but there's also a lot of people that are kind of not a music venue first, right?
Yes.
They're a brewery first, or they're a cafe first, or whatever, and there's music on the side.
Yeah.
So in those cases, there's often less attention given to the performers, right? Because it's like, yeah, we're going to try to get you in. And it's a lot of time less pay and all of that kind of stuff. And so trying to make those venues a little bit better for the musicians. Now, there's give and take there, because sometimes they're just doing their best and they're not trying to do, like, it's
someone who's working like multiple jobs or not a booker. Yeah. We totally understand.
But I think this kind of thing helps. Like, hey, we'll queue up all the things that we need to figure out beforehand so that, this can succeed instead of being messy the day of the show.
Yes, definitely. I feel, especially like for those spaces, this makes everyone's job easier, So,
because we also want those spaces to continue doing that, because it's a great starting point for musicians that are just learning their stuff.
Part of our ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What other resources or tools are available now through TCUP, or that you are planning to implement soon?
Yeah. I mentioned our cupboard, our tea cupboard. On there is, we made a Venuepedia, and it is a pretty comprehensive list of all the venues in the Twin Cities with contact information, how best to go about booking, what the capacity size is, where it is, just for people to be like, I want to play a show, but I don't know where to start. Like, what size scale makes the most sense for me in my current moment in my career? And how do I go about booking that show? Also, on the cupboard, we have just a guide of like, I am new to booking. I want to book my first show. How do I go about booking a show? And it has like a glossary of terms that you may encounter that you maybe have never heard before this email. Like, what does DOS mean? And FOH and all of these terms that are thrown about that once you're in it, you're like, it's second language, but can be intimidating at your first couple shows. And just, yeah, like best practices that we have kind of from veterans in the scene, like this is how we've done things and this is what's worked for us and we've had success. And we've also had some nightmares of like not being super well communicative and maybe don't do these things.
Right.
So that lives on the cupboard as well. We really wanted to create this space for musicians to kind of get the resources that they may need.
Yeah.
Also coming soon, Alex, I'd mentioned, he is brilliant and I feel so fortunate to be organizing with him. He is like making like a mega version of the cupboard, which will include like band profiles. So it'll be like EPKs of sort. So bands, you can like upload your band's picture will be on there, your stage plot will be on there, a little bio, and a link right to listen to the music. So it makes it available for if you're like booking a show, you can just send this link and all of your information is right there. A lot of the bands that I worked with when I was at the Treasury and the Garage, were a lot of newer, younger bands, oftentimes playing their first couple shows, and I would ask for a stage plot, and they wouldn't know what that was, and so we okay, well, let's put like the stage plot maker available on there, and I would ask for like an EPK, and they wouldn't know what that is, and so I was thinking about a lot of those questions of like, what do people just starting out? What are the questions I came across a lot?
Yeah.
So making it more accessible for people. And Alex has done a phenomenal job of making it look really beautiful. And yeah, show calendar. You want to play a show with some people, but you don't have a full bill. Go on Cupboard and post in there. I'm looking to fill out this date, and we've been getting lots of teacup formed bills through that way. It's been really awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that that's being developed. I think it fills a hole and a need for a lot of people. And that was a part of the reasoning for this podcast too. We do episodes on those specific things, how to make an EPK, the process of getting your first show and those kind of things, what to expect the day of a show. So you can go through all of our past episodes if you want to hear some in-depth conversation on any of those things, or if you're more of a auditorial learner, definitely check that out. And don't feel like you have to do all of these things yourself too. I mean, I think a lot of it is, if you want to get into it, find other people that are doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of times your first show comes because you're just opening up for somebody else and they're going to put you on. You don't have to organize the whole thing yourself to start. In fact, you probably should.
Yeah.
But then as you're learning and you're ready to move up, these kind of resources are super valuable. So thank you for putting all that together.
Of course.
Well, I think we've covered everything that I had in mind today. Is there anything that you feel like needed to be mentioned that I didn't get to?
I do want to plug part of this campaign that I mentioned about the advanced process and raising the bar for the scene. We are doing a show kind of celebrating the work that we have done so far and hopefully push us to closer to that 500 goal on Sunday, February 16th at Mortimer's. We have Butter Boys, Bunny Blood, and Ghosting Merit all playing. The show is free and open to the public with registration. And we would love to use it as an opportunity to celebrate the cool music that we have going on here and also get to know more people. And what better way to connect with musicians than at a rock show? So I invite you to come along. It's going to be a very fun show. Two of the bands are Teacup Bands, and Bunny Blood is a newer band that I've listened to their music so far and absolutely phenomenal. So it should be really fun, and I'd love to see you there.
Very cool. We'll put all this in our show notes and links and everything. But the last question I ask all my guests is if you would like to share one secret that you've learned while being a part of the scene that you'd like to pass on to others.
Okay. I don't know if this is fully... Actually, no, I'm not even going to give myself a preface. I had a friend tell me that the best bands aren't the best bands because there's some secret. They're just the bands that didn't break up. and that they were able to work through. And that has been stuck with me in such a big way. It has like really had a profound impact on me because it is easy to give up when things get hard or when things get frustrating. But the best bands are the ones that stayed together and worked through it, and like you got to hear their artwork because of it.
Yeah, most bands break up.
Yeah.
That's the reality
That's just
of
the
it.
reality of it. But I feel the bands that I feel like had a profound impact on me, they were together for a while and they were able to like really find their sound and do some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that has been a guiding force for me, and I would like to pass that on, that it's worth it to stick it out.
I love that. So if people want to get involved, join TCUP, take action, what are their next steps?
Joining the cupboard. All of our information that you could possibly need, how to become a member, when our meetings are, when we have TCUP shows or events, all of it's on the cupboard. We make sure that's very active and updated. You can also follow us on Instagram at TCUPMN, I believe. Check on that.
And we'll also put it in the show notes.
Okay. And we do a pretty good job of keeping our socials updated as well. You can also feel free to email us if you have questions and you want to get involved, and that's teacupminnesota@gmail.com. So yeah, there's many different ways, whatever works. Also, if you see me out and about at a Gully Boys show, or come talk to me. I love to talk about this, and I would love to meet you.
And if people want to follow along with the Gully Boys, where do you send them?
Gully Boys Band on all social media is the best way. Also, gullyboysband.com. We put all of our stuff on there as well.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear the new release. I'm excited to see what TCUP becomes as it evolves and grows. I hope that, we can help and all work together to keep making the scene better. I think it's worth it. For everybody that listened to this episode, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. And the next episode after this is going to be Andy Thompson, a phenomenal local producer, composer. It's going to be so cool. So get excited for that as well. Thank you so much, Nadi, for your time and your education and your effort to make this scene a better place. It's seen and appreciated. We'll see everybody next time.